Hey guys, welcome to the Bourboneering podcast. I'm Austin. Today we're talking about whiskey regions in the U.S. So, I know you've heard of whiskey regions in Scotland, like Islay, the Highland region. I believe there's 5 recognized regions. I could be wrong on that, but they're very distinctive in flavor. Now, just because it's from a certain region doesn't mean it has to have a certain taste, but it's in general, the regions have their own distinct flavors. Now, that's not quite so in bourbon, or at least in the U.S. in general, but it's developing. I think a lot of people are actually pushing for it to be recognized. So I'm going to talk about what regions are kind of developing, some of these are in my opinion, and some of these are, more set in stone. And then I'm kind of gonna talk about what the pros and cons of having regional flavors and things like that. So first off, the regions I see now, the obvious ones at least, will be Kentucky, Tennessee, being Tennessee whiskey. Kentucky being its own form of bourbon, Texas whiskey or Texas bourbon, and I'm even seeing, there's rye up north, more a northern region, looking at more rye like Vermont, different places like that. Even Colorado has Stranahan's, and they have, a very distinct flavor. I hate to call it a region, but it's kind of, it's forming its own niche over there. So let's start with Kentucky. That's going to be your basic bourbon region. When you think of bourbon, this is what you think of. Now, again, just for clarification, bourbon can be made anywhere in the U.S., and it is made everywhere in the U.S. The bottle I'm reviewing today is Balcones, a Texas bourbon. I'm not saying that bourbon has to come from Kentucky, but I'm saying that's the flavor profile. If I had to sum it up in a word, it would be bourbon. Now, Tennessee, they already have a recognized whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, which is basically all the qualifications of bourbon, but it has to be charcoal filtered in, I'm drawing a blank on it now, but in a certain type of wood. This is called the Lincoln County process. And it is a defined type of whiskey. So that's kind of the only really defined region of whiskey, if you will, is Tennessee whiskey. Now, even Tennessee bourbon, I've had one that's been charcoal filtered, but it was not charcoal filtered through the certain type of wood it needs to be. I'm thinking of Peg Leg Porker is the bourbon, but I can't for the life of me think of the wood that the Lincoln County process must use. Now, I've had Long Branch recently on my Instagram. That's from that's from Kentucky. But it's using Texas, I think mesquite, as a charcoal process. So almost the Lincoln County process, but done in Kentucky and done through a different type of wood. And that, I would almost call that a different style. That would not be the traditional Kentucky style of whiskey. Now, Texas is developing its own whiskey trail. It has its own, whiskey flavors developing. Even like Balcones, I have a lot of flavors that overlap throughout their bourbon, their malts, their ryes. There's all that little bit of underlying flavor there. I often attribute it to like burnt plastic, but not as bad as it sounds. That's developing in a lot of Texas whiskeys, and Texas whiskey is coming into its own as a region, Texas being a region for the whiskey. Now, looking at the north and rye, a lot of rye growing regions, especially, obviously Canada, but in the U.S., Vermont, northern states, distill rye, and they're very, very good rye. In fact, back when rye was the most popular, it became the most popular because that was the grain that grew in the U.S. the best. That was before corn was really widespread outside of Kentucky in that region. So rye was the number one spirit. Corn, bourbon developed in Kentucky, in the Kentucky area, because corn was the number one grain that was grown there. Barley wasn't as prominent in the U.S. at the time. So that's kind of how those regions developed long ago. Texas is more modern, has a different birth, a different backstory. But anyway, enough about the different regions. Those will develop over time. They may change. A lot of this is my opinion, so I could be wrong for sure. But the pros and cons of the regions. So I'm comparing this to Scotch in Scotland. The pros are it's more easily definable. The U.S. can come to its own in a whiskey creating country. You've already seen bourbon kind of taking over Scotch in a lot of these national competitions. Now, the U.S., you could have regions in the U.S. just like Scotland, and be taken even more seriously, in my mind, in the international whiskey tasting world. Now, that's the biggest pros. The cons to me is you are kind of pigeonholing a region to a certain flavor. Like obviously bourbon and Tennessee whiskey have very strict definitions, so that's how that's getting kind of pigeonholed. But just like when you're surprised, whether in a good way or a bad way, that you get an Islay Scotch that's not smoky and peaty, it'd be the same way. Oh, I got a Texas whiskey that's not oaky. That's weird, and that could be off-putting. Like I compare it to beer. If a beer claims to be a certain style, and it could be an amazing beer, but outside of the style you're expecting, that usually gives it a lower rating by most, beer, I call them expert beer drinkers or people who are reviewing beer. It could be the best tasting, stout you ever had, but if they label it as an IPA, it's not going to be what you're expecting. So that's kind of the cons. I'm happy to see it happen. I'm happy to see the U.S. become stronger in the whiskey world, more organized, I guess, because it's already a strong whiskey country, but more organized, more sophisticated, if you will. That's just my opinion. Let me know what you think. Comment below if you're here on YouTube, or send me a message on Instagram. Y'all, you know my Instagram and all that. All right, we're going to take a quick little break, and then we're going to get to the review. Hey guys, Austin here with Bourboneering to talk about Prestige decanters. Prestige is where I get my whiskey tasting glasses for all my podcasts. I do all my reviews with these glasses. They're a beautiful tulip shape. They also have a lot of fun rocks glasses and things like that, as well as beautiful decanters like their name suggests. Use the link in the description below and use promo code Bourboneer, and you can get 8% off your order at Prestige. It helps the show out, it helps you out, and helps them out. So check them out when you get a chance, and thanks for listening. Alright guys, and I'm back looking here at Balcones Texas Pot Still Bourbon. It's a straight bourbon whiskey. Interesting fact, they spell whiskey with no E. So this is a 46% alcohol by volume, or what is that, 92 proof. It is from Balcones in Texas. It is a Texas bourbon, right? Obviously. So it kind of goes with our theme here. This was bottled on February 14th of 2019, so over a year ago. This is it's an interesting bottle. There's a love-hate relationship with it in the past. So let's give it a shot on the show here. Good pop. People have called me out on my good pop. Apparently it's a catchphrase, so maybe we'll get a t-shirt with that or something on it later. Alright, so let's pour it. Alrighty. Of course, I'm using my Prestige decanter whiskey connoisseur glass. I just got the whiskey aficionado glass in, and I'll in the future episode I'm going to be comparing these two head to head along with the Glencairn and Rocks glass, other things like that, using the same whiskey. But that's something to look forward to. Make sure you subscribe to catch that video. All right, looking at the color, it's pretty dark. It's, it's Texas being a hotter state and gets a little more oak character for the age. I don't believe this is age stated, although it is straight bourbon, so it's at least 2 years, and because there's no age statement, it should be, oh no, it is age at least 24 months in oak, so it's 2 years old. So there's your answer there. It's really dark for 2-year-old, that's for sure. All right, right on the nose, I get that dark burnt plastic note that I get from everything in Balcones. A lot of places, I blame it on the heat. I get that in some Louisiana bourbons as well, Louisiana whiskeys as well. It's not awful, it's not overpowering, but it's the best way I can describe this nose. It's got a musty caramel here. That's still one of my favorite notes anybody's ever said, musty caramel. Brown sugar, darker notes. Little corn, like raw corn on the nose as well. This is pot stilled, so it's going to have, all those funky flavors in it. I might do an episode about different types of stills and what I know about distilling, which isn't much. Being that I can't do it here in the U.S. All right, let's get on taste. I was about to rate the nose. This is not the bracket battle. Check that out. I believe the first 2 parts of the first round are out now. So go check that out. See if your favorites are winning. All right, let's get the taste here. This one's kind of growing on me. Cinnamon. Strong cinnamon. A little bit less caramel, but it's still there. Raisin is what I get. And I get a lot of that on young whiskey that has been in either smaller barrels or something of the sort. But it's oaky raisin. The finish is very cinnamon spice. A little bit of barrel bitter. But that's good. I'm liking it on this go around. It's had some airtime, and now it's really coming into its own, I believe. I'm gonna have to give it let me take one more taste before I give you a score. Yeah, alright. So as suggested by a longtime listener, Thomas Gandy, my new rating system is same rating system, still going to be out of 5, same exact thing, but instead of just a number, it's going to be out of barrels. So this whiskey, I'm going to have to give it a 2.5 right there. It's very drinkable, very easy, but it's not something I'm going to reach for every day. Not great. So 2.5 barrels, 2.5 barrels on this one. Let me know what you think. Like I said, comment either on my Instagram or on YouTube here if you're listening on YouTube. Leave me a review. Reviews always help, especially on iTunes and Spotify and all that. But anyway, thanks for listening, guys. Let me know what you like about what you like or don't like about the new rating system. Thanks, y'all. Cheers. Thanks for listening, guys. If you enjoyed the podcast, make sure you subscribe on whichever player you're using. Leave a comment and leave a 5-star review if you can. Once you've done that, go follow me on Instagram at Bourboneering or on Twitter at InBourbon, or go like our Facebook page, Bourboneering. All this, as well as my Prestige Decanter affiliate link and a link to sign up for a weekly newsletter, are all below. Thanks for listening, everybody. Cheers.